Hello. Welcome to Career Strategy Forum with Gary Hines on gtownradio.com and at WGGT-LP 92.9 FM in Northwest Philadelphia. Today, I'm continuing my conversation with Regina Robinson. We started this conversation a few weeks ago, and now this is part two. She's my neighbor and an educator and a trainer, and our conversation has been on workforce and education. So this is part two. All right, so I'm going to start the timer again. Now we're back to 30 minutes. So what do you think about remote working, and is it helpful? Is it harmful? I mean, some people had just, from the pandemic, just having gone back to the office or don't want to go back. And I'm sure you heard about Sherelle Parker's mandate earlier this year that workers will have to come back to the office. I don't know what the due date was on that. I think it's already happened, but people weren't happy about it.
Well, uh, I think it depends on the job and it depends on the person. You're right. The pandemic made us pivot. Most of my classes before the pandemic were in person, and I loved it. I loved being in the classroom. I like being face to face with people. But after and during the pandemic, we had to change. We had to put things online because we couldn't stop teaching. And I like that in some ways.
Yeah.
And I think people like that. And I know that a lot of my students say that they would rather work from home, but you can't do that with every job. And I
Mhm.
also think that's isolating. I like a hybrid. Maybe you can work from home 3 days a week and come into the office a couple of 2 days or vice versa or something like that, because I think it's important for people to interact with each other and build relationships. So, and that's difficult to do if you're sitting at home and you're not physically in the room or in the office with other people.
Mhm.
So I love the fact that we can do remote learning and remote work, but I think it has to be looked at on a company by company, job by job basis.
Yeah.
And if you can do a hybrid, if you can give people the best of both worlds, then I think that's a win-win situation.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. On my last podcast, I talked about working remotely and also interviewing remotely and some of the things that people need to be aware of, like technology, for instance, testing things out, also having a comfortable environment. Like if you're working from home and you have kids or pets, you need to tell people that, hey, even though I'm in the building, I'm not available.
Exactly.
Closed spaces and things like that. So it's a whole process, I think, for people to learn. But some people are just thrown into it. I remember when the pandemic started in February of 2020 or March of 2020, I was still at Temple, and we all of a sudden had to go to remote, and people were like, just call up this number and dial in, and it's like, what? It didn't. People just didn't know how to act, and some people's faces were all in the camera. It was really kind of a scary
The
time.
cat face, you remember the lawyer with the cat face?
Yeah, that was popping up, and that was remember people were doing, I don't know if they called it Zoom bombing, where people were jumping into private chats.
Yes, I
They
was
want
on a
to
webinar and that happened just
Yeah, that was crazy. That whole time period was absolutely crazy. But people adjusted. But again, it's where we are now in 2025 is that I believe you're right, the hybrid method, because the isolation effect and the fact that you really can't read people's body language and things sometimes with all of that. Anyway.
yeah, that was, my experience yesterday, because I do a lot of webinars online, and it is, I'm not for those webinars, I'm not even showing my face. I don't see the faces of the participants because a lot of them are in their workplaces, and some of
Hmm.
the workplaces are sensitive or they're working around other people. But I will tell you, and as I said, I enjoy that. I think it's a great option. It gives people mobility. You can do a class or you can do your job from almost anywhere. But as I said, being in that classroom yesterday was so much fun. And we talked about things and we were able to interact with each other in a way that I know would not have happened if we were online. So I think it's people, humans have to have connections.
They
You
do,
have
they
to
really do.
connect with each other.
Yeah, I do find that to be true because you really can't, especially when people don't turn their cameras on. Like there was one organization where you had to have your camera on.
Mhm.
Some people would have them on, but then they wouldn't be on camera. They'd say, "I can't get this adjusted right, or my camera's not working." And it's like, okay, well, what are you really doing over there? You're doing something else. You ain't listening.
Don't ask, don't
Right,
ask.
right. One other thing I want to mention about classroom dynamics, and I used to have this issue too back in the day when I first started teaching. So you have these sometimes you have students who, and they could be adult or they could be younger, who just don't want to get into it. Like, how do you motivate people to participate, to actually get into what you're trying to tell them? Do you have any tricks of the trade for that?
Well, one thing I like to use, I let people know that you're here to learn. I'm here to teach you. I
Mhm.
don't play around. I'm not
Right, right.
mean.
Mhm, not
But
babysit.
I don't play around. I like to motivate people. One of the ways I like to motivate people, depending on the subject I'm teaching. I'm a history buff. I especially love African American history. And if I can insert history into the lesson, into the curriculum, I have found that that is an amazing hook for getting people engaged and keeping them engaged. Another way is to talk about and to be sensitive of their goals and what they want to learn. Try if I have the opportunity, I try to have conversations with my students to find out why are they in the class or what are their goals? What do they expect? What are their expectations? And that allows me to target my lessons and my approach to reaching them. And I'll tell you, I have taught, and I never added it up, but I think over the years I've taught thousands. I've had thousands of people in my classrooms,
Right.
and I will say that my retention rates are very high. I rarely lose a student. If I have multi-day classes, if we start out with 20 people, we may end up with 19, but the only reason that one person left is because maybe some extenuating circumstances, a family circumstance, illness, or whatever. I make my classes fun. I take the stress out of learning. I want you to know, I want my students to know that this is something they can use not only in their on their jobs, but they can also use this in their personal lives. There's always, believe it or not, someone in my class who says, I want to write a book. My life story is so interesting. And now I feel like I can get started. So maybe while they were in the class to learn how to write reports and evaluations, because they've gotten some transferable skills, now they are excited about reaching some of their other learning goals or personal or professional goals.
Mhm, mhm. That's great. And I'm absolutely fascinated by how you incorporate history and Black history in particular into learning. I just want to read one thing. So you use history as a vehicle for learning. Black history is an excellent vehicle for inspiring all learners. Miss Robinson weaves the rich accomplishments of the people of the African diaspora into curricula for maximum engagement. So how do you do that? And do you just go back into things that you found interesting in Black history, or do you try to really relate it to the topic? How do you do that?
Well, it has to relate to the topic.
Mhm.
Has to absolutely has to relate to the topic. The way I really got to see that was I was teaching a class on reading comprehension, and this was a multi-day class. We had one of the films we had was Invisible, Hidden Figures about the women who worked on the space program, the African American women who worked on the space program. And I have to tell you, that classroom was multi-generational, multicultural. It was multi-jobs, different jobs. It was a varied classroom. Um, Immigrants, okay, young people, older people. They were absolutely intrigued and engaged by that material. First, they didn't know anything about it. Secondly, it taught them about American history. It was like how we got here. Right?
Mhm.
All
Yep.
right. So that was one of the films that I was able to use where I saw that. The other one was, believe it or not, The Great Gatsby. The Great
Okay.
Gatsby, we were reading The Great Gatsby, and 99% of the students just couldn't relate to it. So what I did was I this was in Albany. So what I did was I looked at mostly the African American history in Albany, and I found out that there was Henry Johnson. I don't know if you know Henry Johnson. He was one of the Harlem Hellfighters.
Mm.
And there in Albany, there is a Henry Johnson Boulevard.
Wow.
And these people drive on this boulevard almost every day. And what I found out, he was an African American hero, World War One hero. And
Mm.
I told them about that. And that book takes place right after World War One.
Right.
So they were, I didn't, so
Mm.
it's right in my backyard. This history, this book is taking me back to a time that is being recognized in my backyard.
Mhm.
Now, that led me to a project that I've been working on called Invisible Warriors. This is based on the 600,000 African American Rosie the Rivers who helped bring about the Allied victory. And
Mhm.
there's a documentary about that. And what I've been able to do is to take that film and the interviews of, we have 11 Rosies talking about their time during World War I, World War II, and what they learned about themselves, what they experienced, and I've created a 1-day writing workshop around that film. This is a way, and it's isn't just for African Americans. I have people of all races in my classes. The thing they can relate to is the human experience.
Right.
And that's what resonates with people.
Uh-huh. That's great. I think it's so amazing and it's so creative to be able to do something like that. And I never thought about that. A lot of times, I think back when I was teaching, I really was just following the script. It
Yeah.
was here's the outline, here's your syllabus, just follow that to the T. Because I was teaching technical stuff, so I
Mhm.
started off with computer basics, and just really did, and then I did ESL. So it was like very like community-based classes for when community college used to do those kind of things,
Mhm.
Community College of Philadelphia. But anyway, I found that, when I saw that, I was like, wow, that is so interesting. And the Rosie the Riveter story is really, really interesting too. So
Yeah. I actually did a workshop for CSEA, the Civil Service Employees Association. They had a women conference a couple years ago, and I did a workshop where I just took interviews of the Rosies talking about what happened to them, what they learned about themselves as a result of working in the defense industry during that time. And it was fascinating because these women came out of, they were sharecroppers, they were domestic workers, some of them were teachers and professionals, but most of them had come out of very low level jobs. They went into those defense industries, they made money, they bought houses, they were able to support their community organizations, their churches, they were able to educate their children, and they found their gifts. And
mhm.
this workshop asks people to identify a historic event that they've lived through and what did they learn about themselves. Now, on the side, it's also to get them interested in writing.
Okay, right.
But when people get in touch with what they've experienced in their own lives, it's very engaging. It's very fulfilling. It's validating. And those are the things that I love to work on.
Great stuff. Did you ever consider, or maybe you have used, when I think about Black history and film, anything from the Oscar Micheaux period of his films?
Oscar Micheaux. I studied films. I
Oh,
know
okay,
Oscar
so you know all about what I'm
I
talking
know
about.
Oscar
Okay.
Micheaux. I haven't, but it would be something I would try, I would explore because I do love those old black, they called them, race movies.
Race movies, exactly.
Race
Mhm.
movies. Oscar Micheaux was one. There was a company here in Philadelphia. Don't quote me, I think it was the Lincoln Players, but I could be wrong, but there was a film company here in Philadelphia. There were also, and I did not know this until a couple of years ago, but there were churches and religious people used film to get people into the churches and to stop all their sinning.
Oh my
There was
goodness.
this one film it was called The Devil's Train or something, and I mean, it was actually well done. This was like from the 1920s. This minister and his wife made this film where they were showing that if you're drinking and fornicating and all
Mhm.
that stuff, you're gonna end up on the devil train.
Oh, boy. Oh, I
And you
love to
know
see
where
something
the
like that.
devil train goes. Only has one stop.
And that's hell, probably.
That's it. That's exactly. But,
Wow.
you know, and that's what I said when I started studying communications. That's what I was looking at is how the media, how film, how television, because when I was young, I was a big PBS and the BBC, the British shows. And it shaped my view of the world and what was possible. And I felt and I knew that this could do the same for other people.
Mhm.
What ideas are people picking up and what do those ideas do to their perceptions of themselves? And
Right.
that's
Yeah.
why I love teaching because I can have an influence on you changing your perception of your ability to learn, of your ability to advance in your career or personally, and that's why I love what I do.
And I bring that up too for another reason because I consider myself a connector. I really like connecting people that have similar interests or maybe find some. And it doesn't always work out, but sometimes I put people together and it's like, why'd you introduce me to them?
Right,
And I say, okay, in my mind, I was thinking y'all would really hook up,
right.
but somebody I would like to introduce you to is a guy named Lynn Webb, who used to have a show on G Town Radio and now has his own podcast, and his podcast is about Black film. And he and his co-host, their goal is to review every Black film ever made. So we're talking Oscar Michelle up to Spike Lee, up to Black exploitation, everything. So I'll send you his information, but you might want to check out one of his podcasts and just hear what they're talking about. He's a really cool guy, and he's always like on top of what's happening and stuff. And he's, one of these, reviewers that's very critical. And it's like, well, they shouldn't have did this, and why did so I say, y'all
I
can
would love that.
yeah,
I
some real
actually
good discussions.
Do you know Real Black,
Oh
RE?
yes,
Yes,
Michael.
yes.
I can't think of Michael's last name, but I
I
think
can't think of it either, but that I subscribe to their YouTube channel, and
Mhm.
I often look at those films. Yeah, I think those films, it's almost like we were living in this parallel world because when I look at, and I like old movies, so I look at older, general market movies,
Right, right.
and I do love the race movies. I even, I mean, I'm not going to say I hate to admit it, but I have a collection of Amos and Andy
Oh goodness.
TV shows.
Yeah, that's historical for sure.
That's historical. And I think it's important to look at those things because those vehicles because we need to look back and see what the environment that our ancestors were living through
Mhm.
and what how they managed and navigated that world because I think that there's definitely some information that we can use right now.
Oh, yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
So I went off in that direction kind of unexpectedly, but I wanted to come back to your course offerings a little bit. If you could talk to me a little bit about some of those. I guess I'm more interested in, you've been talking a lot about the writing for the workplace. I totally understand that. Stress management, leadership skills, and maybe conflict resolution. If you could touch on those offerings and what you do in those courses.
Yeah. So, one of my big ones, as mentioned earlier, is emotional intelligence. And that's really about self management and working with other people. The other classes that I put together, as you mentioned, time management, and I do a lot of these with some of my colleagues. I know that I introduced you to one, Lydia Henry,
Yep.
who has Vision Coach Dynamics. I
Mhm.
also do a lot of professional development. I was fortunate enough to do initiative where I was working with the Johnson House Historical Site on a professional development for their board. So those are some of the classes. I also do time management, but as I said, most of my classes are in the writing, communication
Mhm.
skills. One of my classes is pronunciation, focus on pronunciation. And believe me, I first taught this in New York City. Native New Yorkers had stronger accents than many of the immigrants in
Right, right.
it was funny. And when I was up in New York yesterday, I heard that accent again and I had to laugh. I was like, you need to get into my my pronunciation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You
Because that also people don't realize that the American standard pronunciation is what's accepted in business. So
mhm,
you may have the best computer skills, you may have the best time management skills, but what can keep you back is the way you present yourself.
exactly.
And if you have a strong accent, even though and I tell my students, "Look, I'm not this is not, class to get you to erase your accent.
Mm,
This is a tool to have in your back pocket, just like time management and conflict resolution. And when you're home or with your family, you can, talk like you want to talk. But when you're in a business setting, you have to present a professional attitude, and this will help you to do that.
yeah, and a few years ago, I did a small sort of segment of one of my classes on code switching, and you should have
Mm,
seen the resistance that came out of that class. They were like, "I am not changing. I'm not gonna talk white. I'm not doing this." So I was just wondering, you're experiencing that. Like, have you heard, people that do they get it? Like, you have to change up a little bit when you're around different audience.
yeah, they
You
do. And also another thing, another reason why you want to speak with a more American standard pronunciation is something as simple as a lot of the workers, especially the tax workers, they're on the phone and it's difficult. Very often they have to repeat themselves. Also, this helps to increase their listening skills so that they can make out what the client is saying. So, yes, a lot of times you get that resistance, but people, they want to move up in their jobs. They
Mhm.
want to do their jobs better. And as I said, this isn't something I'm not erasing your accent, but when you're on the job, this will help you. And people after my first class, they go back to their workplaces and they come back and they say, "You know what?
It was helpful.
My supervisor isn't asking me to repeat myself every when I speak to him or her." So they see the benefit right away. And that's the other thing with adult education that I love is that I encourage my students to use whatever skills we've just covered in the class, go back and start using it right away and see what happens. That's why we get people coming back into the classrooms. It's
Right,
because
right.
they see the benefit immediately.
One of the joys that I had when I was doing ESL, again, this is back in the 90s as well, is like just the joy from immigrants that come to this country and are so anxious to learn English. And when they get some things right, they're like in tears sometime. They're so happy to be part of this American experience. Well, we're talking the 90s, okay? So, but yeah, but I get that, and I think that it must really resonate with you and give you such a heartfelt, emotional feeling to see that, like, look what I did for them, and this is going to change their lives. I'm sure that.
Well, they do the work. Like, my students are always like, "You did this for me." And I tell them, "You did the work. I'm just
Mhm.
the guide. I'm just the coach." And exactly, especially for my New York State client, a lot of those workers, the immigrants, are coming into our country with advanced degrees,
Oh,
professional
sure.
degrees.
Right,
They
right.
were professionals in their home country, and they've
Hmm.
come here, and because of the language barrier and their
Hmm.
accents, they're stuck in the entry level jobs. I have had, and I can tell you, I have the statistics. I have had people who were working either in maintenance or at the tax department. A lot of them land in the tax department because of they can speak, another language, and
Right.
New York State has a lot of taxpayers with a lot of different languages.
Mhm.
But once they get that pronunciation down, I have seen people who were tax professionals who were doctors in their home country
Right.
now move up
Uh-huh.
in the state, and they're working for the medical examiner or the health department doing their profession, increasing their salaries. I had a woman who was in a maintenance. She was a housekeeper. She was in her native country. She was an accountant.
Mhm.
After that class, she was able to get a job in the comptroller's office.
Wow.
So it happens. And then they tell their coworkers, and then more people sign up for the class.
Right. That keeps you in business
That
too.
can be
definitely do that. So, yeah, that's always amazing. I see that. Real quickly, tell me what you think about the state of education right now in the Black community. And I'm thinking more lines along the lines of traditional schools versus charter schools versus homeschooling. Do you have any thoughts on that in that area?
Well, I'm not an educator or a teacher certified in K through 12. What I will say, it's almost like a patchwork. Like I know personally and I read about young Black students doing amazing things within the classrooms. I read about schools that are teaching young children in a way that they are finding their gifts and they are able to blossom. I went to two HBCUs and I'm glad I did. I know that from learning when I grew up outside of Philadelphia and my I always went to integrated schools. So
Mhm.
I always competed with white kids. So there was never, I never had that intimidation. But the one thing that was missing from that education was the Black history. When
Mm,
I got on Fisk campus,
mhm.
and I learned about the amazing people who came out of that school and were teachers at that school. And even the students I met, how smart they were. There's something to be said for African American people, either running our own schools or supplementing our schools. And I would say that's something we have to continue to do. I think we have to keep our HBCUs really strong,
Yeah.
and that is because knowing our history helps us to understand that we have standing in any industry we want to go into, any profession we want to go into. And that's one of the things that I didn't talk about this earlier, but one of the things I was able to do is I have a girlfriend who has a private elementary school in Liberty City in Miami. And one of the things she asked me to do, knowing my interest in Black history, is to put together lessons that would supplement their social studies program from a major publisher and that would introduce the students to Black history. So when they were studying the Revolutionary War, I talked about Benjamin Banneker, I talked about Crispus Attucks, I talked about different African Americans who fought in the Revolutionary War and what that did for those students. So I did that for the whole semester. Anything they were talking about, and it was really great when they were talking about Philadelphia and the Declaration of Independence, because I could tell them about, the Black history in Philadelphia. And let me tell you, the reading scores went up, the engagement went up.
Right.
Their ambitions for their careers
Mm,
were just opened up. So where most of the boys wanted to go into the NFL or the NBA,
right.
right? Or the girls wanted to be hairdressers and influencers, which there's nothing wrong with that. Now they learned about the Black scientists, the Black entrepreneurs, the Black inventors, okay, the Black
Mm,
dress designers, the Black explorers, they learned that and then their world opened up.
yeah.
So I do think that it's important, and there have been studies done on the influence of teaching Black history to at risk youth that has yielded tremendous changes. First of all, their self esteem goes up, their place in the world. They have a more positive view of their place in the world, and they have more interested in their communities. So I think I really am not an expert on what's going on in terms of charter schools and things like that, but I do say that it is absolutely important. And I think this is important for all children to know the full history of this country.
Oh God, they have to, and especially in this day and age right now, where we are right now, it's more critical than ever.
More critical.
So, but that's good
And
improvement.
they're fascinated by it too, because I know that people will say, I didn't know that. That's fascinating. It is fascinating.
Yeah, yes. Especially things that happen right here in Philadelphia. You know that they have people that have no idea about Mother Bethel and how that came about and all of that. It's like it's just amazing. Well, listen, we've come just about to the end of time here. I want you to give me some contact information for you and anything that you want to let folks know that's coming up that you'd like to, talk about a little bit?
Okay. Well, again, I'm Regina Robinson. I'm an adult educator. I did start a company. My company is RM Robinson Solutions, LC. You can get in touch with me by phone at one. My Facebook page is RM Robinson Solutions. I love posting things like I'm always posting something about the Great Gatsby or the Invisible Warriors that my students send me. I
Mhm.
also post things about that would be of interest to people in terms of upgrading their writing and reading skills. My email address is regina at solutionsrmrs.com. That's how you can get in touch with me.
Very good, very good. Well, I want to thank you so much for this conversation today. It's been amazing. You're amazing. All this good stuff. I will have your contact information on my page for folks that want to get in after they've listened to this podcast. And thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate it. And thank you so much.
Folks, you've been listening to Career Strategy Forum with Gary Hines, and our guest today has been Regina Robinson. Again, you can hear us on G Town Radio at gtownradio.com, UGGT-LP 92.9 FM. I am on every second and fourth Saturdays from 11:30 a.m. till 12 noon. My shows can be found on Spotify and Mixcloud, and we'll go from there. Thanks again, Regina.
Thank you, Gary. Have a great day.
All right. Hold on just a second, okay?